The Colorado night was calm but heavy with the foreboding chill of late autumn. Ethan Cross shifted uneasily as he made his rounds near the Halcyon Observatory, a sprawling research facility nestled in the Rockies. The hum of distant generators punctuated the silence, but it wasn't enough to settle his nerves. Years of combat experience had taught him to trust his instincts, and tonight something felt off. Ethan paused, his breath visible in the frigid air, and scanned the horizon. His flashlight's beam cut through the darkness, illuminating only rocks and sparse vegetation. He reached for the comms unit on his shoulder. "Base, this is Cross. Nothing unusual so far, but..." A sudden light streaked across the sky, silencing him mid-sentence. It wasn't a meteor, it moved too deliberately, carving jagged patterns as if searching. Ethan squinted, his heart pounding. The object slowed, then halted above the observatory, bathing the area in an eerie crimson glow. He instinctively drew his sidearm, though it felt laughably inadequate. The light dimmed and a craft descended, its surface glinting like liquid metal under the pale moonlight. The ship was both alien and predatory, its edges sharp, its form impossibly sleek. Ethan took a cautious step back, his mind racing. The craft landed with a soundless finality. Before Ethan could react further, the ground trembled and figures emerged from the ship. They were towering, at least 10 feet tall, their forms a grotesque blend of organic muscle and biomechanical plating. Their eyes glowed an unnatural red, and intricate runes shimmered across their armor like pulsating veins. Ethan's grip on his weapon tightened as one of the beings stepped forward. It didn't walk but glided, its presence radiating a palpable sense of authority. The air grew thick, each breath a struggle. "We are the executioners," the figure said, though its mouth didn't move. The voice resonated directly in Ethan's mind, a low, droning timbre that vibrated through his skull. "Harbingers of balance. Enforcers of justice." Ethan swallowed hard, his mouth dry. Justice for what? The executioner tilted its head, as if contemplating whether Ethan was worth answering. "Your species has transgressed. Violated the sacred order." "What are you talking about?" Ethan demanded, his voice steadier than he felt. "Humanity's greed for knowledge has torn through the veil," the executioner continued. "A scientist among you has pierced dimensions, summoning what should not exist in your realm. For this, your kind must be eradicated." Ethan's mind raced. He wasn't a scientist, but he knew enough to understand that tampering with dimensions was a line best left uncrossed. "Wait," he said, lowering his weapon slightly. "Eradicated? Isn't that a little extreme? We didn't even know what we were doing." The executioner's eyes flared brighter. "Ignorance does not absolve guilt. The entity summoned by your kind, a force your primitive minds call death, threatens the fabric of existence. To ensure balance, humanity must cease." The word death sent a chill down Ethan's spine. He opened his mouth to respond but stopped when the executioner raised a clawed hand. A holographic display materialized in the air, showing a face Ethan recognized immediately, Dr. Marcus Bellamy. "This man is the architect of your doom," the executioner intoned. "His actions have opened the rift. He has summoned death itself." Ethan cursed under his breath. Marcus Bellamy was a name whispered with both awe and caution in scientific circles. A genius known for his work in quantum mechanics, but also for pushing boundaries without concern for ethics. The executioner continued, its tone cold and final. "Earth's eradication will commence in 72 of your Earth hours. This is your warning?" "No?" Ethan barked, stepping forward despite the overwhelming aura of power emanating from the beings. "You can't just wipe out billions of people. Give us a chance to fix this." The executioner seemed momentarily taken aback by Ethan's defiance. Its companions shifted slightly, their glowing eyes narrowing. "Why should we grant you mercy?" the leader asked. "Because not all of us are like him," Ethan shot back, gesturing toward the hologram of Marcus. "Some of us fight to protect, not destroy. Let me find him. Let me stop whatever he's done." There was a long, tense pause. The executioner's gaze bore into Ethan, scrutinizing him. Then it lowered its hand and the hologram vanished. "Your defiance is noted," it said. "You have 48 hours to neutralize the rift and prevent the entity's emergence. Fail and humanity will be extinguished." The executioners turned and began to retreat toward their ship. Ethan stood frozen, heart hammering, until the leader glanced back at him. "Pray that your courage is matched by your ability," it said before disappearing into the craft. The alien ship lifted off silently, vanishing into the night sky as quickly as it had arrived. The crimson glow faded, leaving Ethan alone in the darkness. His comm unit crackled. Cross? What's going on out there? Ethan took a shaky breath, holstering his weapon. We've got a problem, he muttered, his voice grim. As he turned toward the observatory, his mind churned with questions and fears. He had no idea how to find Marcus Bellamy, let alone undo whatever chaos the man had unleashed. But one thing was certain: humanity's survival now rested squarely on his shoulders. And the clock was already ticking. Ethan Cross drove through the desolate mountain roads, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. His mind churned with fragments of what he'd witnessed: the alien executioners, their cold decree, and the image of Dr. Marcus Bellamy. Time was slipping away, and the fate of humanity hinged on tracking down the man responsible for opening the rift. His destination lay deep in the wilderness, an abandoned Cold War bunker repurposed as Bellamy's private lab. Officially, the place didn't exist, but Ethan's military contacts had unearthed its location. It wasn't the first time Marcus had crossed ethical boundaries, but this time his curiosity had unleashed something catastrophic. Ethan's truck skidded to a halt outside a heavy steel door embedded into the rocky hillside. He slung his rifle over his shoulder and approached cautiously. The keypad was caked with frost, its edges worn from years of use. Bellamy, Ethan muttered, pounding on the door. Open up or I'll find a way in. Moments later, the door hissed open, revealing a gaunt figure in a stained lab coat. Dr. Marcus Bellamy's pale face was illuminated by the flickering fluorescent lights behind him. His sharp, sunken eyes darted over Ethan, calculating whether the man was friend or foe. You shouldn't be here, Bellamy said, his voice clipped, though laced with fear. Yeah, and you shouldn't be ripping holes in the fabric of reality, Ethan shot back, brushing past him into the dimly lit corridor. The air inside was stale, metallic, and oppressive. Bellamy closed the door and turned to face Ethan. I take it you've met our uninvited guests? The executioners, Ethan replied, narrowing his eyes. They've given us 48 hours to fix this, or humanity gets wiped off the map. Start talking, Marcus. What the hell have you done? Bellamy exhaled shakily, running a hand through his unkempt hair. It wasn't supposed to go this far, he began, leading Ethan deeper into the labyrinthine lab. The project was theoretical. A way to access alternate dimensions for unlimited energy. But the calculations, there was an error. He stopped before a massive, glowing apparatus that hummed with unstable energy. Tendrils of dark light twisted and writhed around a jagged tear suspended in midair. The rift was no larger than a man, but its presence was suffocating. Ethan's stomach churned as he felt an inexplicable pull toward it, as if the void itself was alive and hungry. Let me guess, Ethan said, tearing his gaze away from the rift. That's the error? Bellamy nodded grimly. I didn't summon death, Ethan. It came through on its own. The rift is a gateway, and what lies beyond, it's not just another dimension. It's entropy incarnate. A force that thrives on the decay of existence. Ethan's jaw tightened. And you thought it was a good idea to play God? I wasn't the only one involved, Bellamy snapped, his tone defensive. There were backers, shadowy figures funding the project. They wanted results, no matter the risks. Names? Ethan demanded. Bellamy shook his head. They're untouchable. Focus on what we can control. I've been working on a way to close the rift, but it's unstable. Every time I try to contain it, it grows stronger. As if on cue, the rift flared, sending a shockwave rippling through the lab. Equipment toppled and the lights flickered. Ethan steadied himself, his eyes locked on the growing tear. What happens if you can't contain it? Bellamy's voice dropped to a whisper. Death will fully manifest in our dimension. And nothing, executioners, humans, anything, can stop it. Before Ethan could respond, a deafening crack echoed through the lab. He spun around, raising his rifle as shadows coalesced into monstrous forms. They were humanoid but grotesquely twisted, their features obscured by swirling black mist. These were Death's harbingers, creatures born of the rift. Get behind me. Ethan barked, opening fire. The bullets tore through the creatures, but they reformed almost instantly, their shapes shifting like smoke. Bellamy scrambled to a console, his fingers flying over the controls. I can stabilize the rift temporarily, but I'll need time. We don't have time. Ethan growled, slamming another clip into his rifle. One of the creatures lunged, and he barely sidestepped its razor-like claws. With a grunt, he drove his knife into its core, and it dissipated in a wail of anguish. The executioner's arrival was announced by a blinding light that flooded the lab. The alien beings materialized, their forms imposing against the chaos. Without hesitation, they began to annihilate the harbingers, their weapons emitting bursts of energy that disintegrated the shadowy creatures. Ethan lowered his rifle but didn't relax. "Took you long enough?" The leader of the executioners turned its glowing eyes on him. "You persist, human, but your efforts are insufficient. The rift expands. Humanity's fate is sealed." "Not if I can help it," Ethan snapped. "We're closing this thing." The executioner tilted its head. "You have 24 hours remaining. Your attempts to delay the inevitable are futile." Ethan stepped closer, defiance in his stance. "If it's so futile, why are you here? You need us to stop this as much as we need you." The executioner's eyes dimmed slightly as if considering his words. "Very well. The rift must be contained. But understand this, human. Should you fail, not even we can prevent the entity's dominion." The harbingers vanquished, silence returned to the lab, save for the crackling of the rift. Bellamy collapsed into a chair, sweat dripping from his brow. "I've bought us time," he said hoarsely. "But sealing it will require a sacrifice, someone to interface with the dimensional energy directly. And it's almost always fatal." Ethan's eyes met Bellamy's. "We'll cross that bridge when we get to it. For now, tell me everything I need to know about closing that rift." The lab trembled again, the rift pulsing ominously. Ethan glanced at the executioners, their forms motionless yet unervingly present. He felt the weight of their judgment, the pressure of time slipping through his fingers. "Let's get to work," he said, his voice steady despite the storm of fear and uncertainty raging within him. The lab shook violently as the rift expanded, its energy spiraling outward in chaotic arcs. Ethan Cross stood at the console, sweat beading on his forehead as he watched Marcus Bellamy frantically adjust the stabilizers. Each keystroke sent sparks flying from the aging equipment, and the hum of the rift's energy drowned out all but the most urgent sounds. "Bellamy?" Ethan barked, his voice cutting through the cacophony. "How much longer until you can seal it?" Bellamy glanced up, his face pale and drawn. "It's not about time anymore, Ethan. It's about stability. If we rush this, the collapse could obliterate half the planet. Then figure it out." Ethan snapped, slamming a fist against the console. "The executioners aren't going to give us a second chance, and neither is that thing." The thing Ethan referred to was no longer just an ominous tear in reality. The rift pulsed violently, and from its depths emerged death. It took the form of a colossal, skeletal figure cloaked in shifting shadows, its empty eye sockets radiating an abyssal light. The very air seemed to wilt around it, growing colder and heavier with each passing moment. When death spoke, its voice was not heard but felt, a visceral vibration in the core of every living being. "You meddle with forces beyond your comprehension," it intoned, its hollow eyes fixing on Ethan. "Mortals always strive to conquer what they cannot understand. Your arrogance is your undoing." Ethan tightened his grip on his rifle, though he knew it would be useless against such a force. Still, he stood his ground, refusing to let fear dictate his actions. "We're not giving up," he said, his voice firm. "You don't get to decide our fate." Death tilted its head, almost amused. "Your resistance is futile. I am entropy. I am the end. Your species has summoned me, and now I will consume your world." The executioners stepped forward, their weapons glowing with lethal energy. Their leader addressed death with a calm, resolute tone. "Entity, you have no place here. Return to your plane or face destruction." Death turned its gaze to the executioners, and for the first time, its voice carried a trace of disdain. "You presume to challenge me? You are nothing but cosmic scavengers, incapable of true creation or destruction. I will extinguish you as easily as I will these mortals." Before the executioners could respond, Death raised one skeletal hand, and a wave of darkness surged toward them. Ethan dove for cover as the lab was engulfed in chaos. The executioners' energy shields flared, holding back the tide of destruction, but cracks began to form in their defenses. Bellamy shouted from the console. "Ethan, I can't hold the rift much longer. If we're going to do this, it has to be now." Ethan scrambled to his feet, adrenaline pumping through his veins. "What do you need?" "A direct interface with the dimensional energy," Bellamy said, his voice tight with desperation. "But it's not stable. Whoever interfaces will likely die," Ethan finished for him. He glanced at the rift, then at Death, whose overwhelming presence was sapping the life from everything around it. "Then it has to be me." Bellamy froze. "Ethan, you don't understand. This isn't just dying, it's obliteration. No trace of you will remain." "Just tell me how to do it," Ethan insisted, his jaw set. Bellamy hesitated, then reluctantly handed Ethan a device, an intricate glove-like mechanism wired to the console. This will let you channel the energy, but you'll have to get close to the rift. It's the only way to stabilize it long enough for me to seal it." Ethan nodded, strapping the device onto his hand. The metal felt cold and unforgiving, a stark reminder of the sacrifice he was about to make. He turned to the executioners, who were still locked in combat with death's shadowy tendrils. "Buy me time," he said. The leader of the executioners regarded him with a piercing gaze. "Your courage is noted, human. Do not squander it." With that, the executioners surged forward, unleashing a barrage of energy blasts that forced death to focus its attention on them. Ethan seized the opportunity, sprinting toward the rift. The closer he got, the more the air seemed to resist him, pulling at his body like a relentless tide. At the edge of the rift, Ethan activated the device. Pain lanced through his arm as the energy coursed into him, searing every nerve. The world around him blurred, and for a moment he felt as if he were floating between dimensions, caught in the infinite expanse of existence. Death turned its gaze back to him, its voice reverberating with fury. "You dare challenge me, mortal?" Ethan gritted his teeth, forcing himself to remain standing. "You don't belong here," he said through the pain. "And I'm sending you back." Bellamy's voice crackled through the comms. "Hold it steady, Ethan. Just a few more seconds." The rift began to collapse, its edges folding in on themselves. Death let out an unearthly roar, its form distorting as it was pulled back toward its plane. Its final words echoed in Ethan's mind, a chilling promise. "This is not the end. I will return." With a blinding flash, the rift sealed and the lab fell into an eerie silence. The executioners stood motionless, their glowing eyes fixed on the spot where the rift had been. Bellamy slumped against the console, his face a mix of relief and grief. But Ethan was gone. The executioner leader stepped forward, addressing Bellamy. "The human fulfilled his purpose. His sacrifice spares your world, for now. But heed this warning: tamper with the fabric of existence again, and no force will save you." Bellamy nodded silently, his hands trembling. As the executioners departed, Bellamy stared at the empty space where Ethan had stood, his mind haunted by the man's final act of heroism.